Hi, I'm Seamless, and this is the third part of the making of Modulators of the Universe. This part will be the mixing and mastering one. We're talking about mixing and mastering Modulators of the Universe. I'll remind you that you can pick up this project for, if you want it. You can actually have the project if you go to thefixstore.com/SeamlessR and look at the actual album, and you can get the deluxe version. You can actually also get individual ones, but if you want to get the whole one, you get a discount than if you just bought all of them at once. Anyway, mixing this guy was a bit different because it's different track genre than I normally do. But a lot of the things that you want to accentuate in hardstyle are not the same things that you want to accentuate in regular stuff. And I mentioned a whole bunch in the sound design portion about how certain things about the impact of hardstyle are just not as punchy and not as hard as other genres, which is neither good or bad, but it's just a fact. And that fact actually makes it kind of a lot easier to mix. But the other part of it is that it's actually a little bit like metal mixing, because in metal, like hardstyle, there's one dominating instrument that is very full spectrum and interacts with everything at every level. In metal, those are the guitars. They hit every single part of the spectrum, low, mids, and highs, and even if you don't want them to. And you have to mix them to interact with everything and make them sound like they're present in every part of the spectrum against other things that are also in every part of the spectrum. They clash with everything. And that's the same thing with the hardstyle kick. A hardstyle kick is very full spectrum. It has bass, it has mids, it has highs, and they interact with everything at every part of the spectrum. So we have to I actually approached mixing them in here more or less the same way that I'd approached mixing a metal track. And that, when we come down to this project, I have to go all the way to hell down here because for some reason I decided to put these automation clips really far away from the main track. Not totally sure why I did that, but this should give you kind of an idea about what I'm talking about. Normally these days, when I do ducking, I do that with automation. I do it much like this. But the reason why there's so many of them is because I'm not just ducking entire things all at once, although I think I am doing that. Nope, it's all very individual. So I'm ducking largely individual things, and that's mostly because there's not that much to begin with. Like there's the leads and the elements and whatever, and that's all that kind of there is. And during the times where there's the kick actually playing, is usually it's against very wide and very full sounding things, but it's just one thing in regardless. So you have like the pluck and the two different leads. So they're the same lead, right? Yeah. Now actually, here's precisely what's happening. That's how this is being mixed. So the way that this is going on is that when I made the kick, I went to the kick and I looked at like its physical presence, saw a big peak there, and I saw that like it mattered more that the higher frequencies kind of got out of the way too. So here's the big peak here to make room for it, and the higher frequencies moving out of the way, but they're not going as far as. No, I guess they're actually going. No, they're going around the same way. I think what I did is I moved the min-max for that particular parameter. Let's find it. No, they're all the same. Do I just not go down as far? Because it looks like I am. Did I do that in the channel linking itself? Can I see it, please? There we go. Now. Maybe just going that far down, for some reason I can't. It's not automating or animating properly. That's kind of weird. But, either that or that's actually being linked to a peak controller. No, it's automation clip. Thanks, Windows. Q band 7. Which one is band 7? You're band 2. Band 2. Balance. Balance. Okay. GG. GG me. And point being is I automate the frequencies out of the way to kind of make room for things a bit more delicately than I would other stuff, and it's for that reason. And like, actually, much in the same as metal, I didn't actually think about this until I started saying it, but like there's a lot in common with hardstyle and metal. And metal, while you want to have a punch and impact, that kind of thing, you'll never get the same kind of punch and impact in a metal song as you will an EDM or electronic song, and it's really because of the limiting factor of what the guitars represent. And I mean, there's other, like every kind of instrument that's in a metal song is usually very overbearing and powerful, and it's hard to kind of react to all that versus an electronic song where you can have songs like that, but they're synthetic and perfect, so you can deal with them and they don't sound weird when you do. But it sounds weird in metal when you do that. Of course, there's always hybrids and stuff, and people are fine with that. and you can do what you want. You know, if you want to be a sales baller, that's absolutely possible. Yeah, so like that, both limitations exist where you essentially just can't have it hit as hard. But a hardstyle doesn't care because you're not supposed to, so it doesn't really matter. And then beyond that, like after like all that, like it's all very, you know, EQing individual things, like the lead. This is mostly just high passing it, honestly. And then this is the pluck thing. Where's the pluck? This just gets a big old balance on it. It's a bit of a low key instrument anyway, so it's not. And by that I mean like it's not very high profile. Not that it's a lower key. It's not. It's the same key, but it's not as on top of stuff. So the whole thing can be hit. Like the point of doing the selective side chaining with the lead here is that we want the lead to be on top pretty much all the time. We don't really want it to sound like it's being killed. So if you listen to it. This kind of sidechaining serves to create headroom for stuff, but not like the rest of EDM. Sound like everything is being just like bricked in our faces and like really killed with a much more stylistic application of sidechaining or ducking. Same thing with metal. If we ever did anything that hard, like I would do on like an electro track, it would sound really dumb. But like we want to use multi-band ducking essentially like we're doing right now, with the idea to create a more transparent profile where it's not immediately clear that anything is being ducked. And then it only feels that way when we look at things individually without like the source involved. But then when it's all together, it all sounds like a nice smooth pile of loud and big, which is a big goal for metal and hardstyle stuff. That's being ducked. It's got its own thing too. And after that, it was really much just kind of a giant task to try to shove it all together in a way that's not very destructive. And there wasn't a lot to go on there. Like, as much as it feels like there isn't sub in hardstyle tracks, there's still sub. It's still a very full frequency, full spectrum thing. This limit here isn't really there to do it serve any purpose. Every so often, like a hit will come in that's kind of there, but like that's not enough of a difference to actually matter against everything else. The lows and the mids, like the mid, I think probably levels up pretty hard. Still being kind of just careful about it. I'm not really pushing it too hard. I'm pushing it up and I bring it down to post. And the purpose of that is that you bring it up the pre-gain into the compression, and then after post you bring it down, so you have a compressed signal, and it's overall louder. But then you bring the level down, and you do that, you have essentially the squashed profile, but a bit quieter. So you get like the benefits of like the fuller feel of it, but then it's not as in your face about it. This didn't even really accomplish that because it's not being pushed hard enough through it. Like this is like as far as compression goes, super duper soft, and it's not because this track is not compressed. It's just that this isn't the thing doing the compression too much. I mean, on the master, it's kind of doing a lot. Actually, no, it's not. It's not doing even a little bit as much as it usually does in some of my other stuff. And like it's peaking only like, you know, 4 or 5 dB, like 3 dB, 3.7 dB actually above 0. That's not a big deal. It's not a huge thing. And what I mean by that, when I said that it's not so much that there's not a lot of compression happening, it's just that's not happening here. The question becomes, where is it happening? Is it happening at the sound design level? Is it happening at a per instrument level? And the answer is not really no. And to answer this question, I'm going to give you a big spiel actually about compression. I talked about this with the student the other day, and I actually made a video about this on my Facebook page. That's called Compressing and Compressors. The gist of it is that compression is more than just using a compressor. A compressor does compress things in so far as it reduces dynamic range. You can, of course, you know, increase dynamic range. You can do all different kind of crap with the compressors. But the purpose of compression is to reduce dynamic range because you're compressing dynamic range. So if that's the overall goal of what we want to do, a whole bunch of crap we do in just regular mixing is actually compression. And the goal of increasing headroom. You increase your headroom by reducing dynamic range. Like the ducking stuff that I'm doing with the leads and all that kind of thing, I do that to make room for the kick to fit in. And when we reduce the amount of conflict between those two elements, the overall peaking is reduced. And that means that we've reduced the dynamic range of the track. So even before the track even hit the master, it was already very compressed. And so I don't really like the standard approach of mixing and mastering, where you separate the two ideas, where you have a pre-master mix where you mix it really hard and you try really hard to make it sound really good, and then you master that. Like, because in the process of doing all that, of that mixing it really hard, making it sound really good, you're actually doing a lot of compression. And you might hear, you know, sort of wizened, older, like venerable engineers telling you not to ever, like, not to use master compression, use as little compression as possible. Really what they're saying is that they don't want you to use compressors, because compression is everywhere all the time, forever. Everything that they tell you to do, like the EQing, the leveling, the ducking, the side chaining, all that stuff, all the mixing stuff, even the arrangement considerations that you make to create less conflict depending on what instruments you have at what time and transitions and whatever, that all adds to your compression profile of your overall headroom and your mix. You're just not using compressors. And sort of the beef with compressors that people have is that they're very heavy-handed. They're essentially just volume automation, and they just indiscriminately crush everything unless you're very careful about it. So that's why they usually say not to use compressors on the master, or at least to not use it as little as possible. Of course, how we like how things sound is usually because of that heavy-handed compression, so we have to kind of take that with a grain of salt, and with the understanding that our genre may or may not matter to the kind of people who say that kind of stuff. Jesus. In this track in particular, the master compression wasn't even that important, because the track was already pretty compressed just by nature of how it was mixed, and that wasn't even that hard because there was arranged in such a way that there wasn't that much stuff happening in the first place. So like that all contributed to the ultimate compression of everything. And that's usually why I like not separating the ideas, because it's not even really 2 stages. It's like 5 stages. You've got your arrangement of stuff that's contributing to how things are going to be together. You've got your sound design of stuff that's going to contribute how stuff's going to work out together. You've got mixing, which could be broken up into leveling and EQing, and then there's like the side chaining or whatever. That's like a 6th thing, and then eventually you have your master compression to bring it all together. That's a whole bunch of different stuff you have to do, and they all rely on each other to exist. And it says that like changes on one thing will necessitate changes on others. You basically have to pick and choose where you want to put your effort, because less effort put on, say, leveling would mean that you have to work harder on your EQ to make the stuff live together, because now it's all too loud, it can't work out. Less effort put on EQing will mean that you have to kind of live with leveling as like your method of making sure things are present or not, independent and living together, that kind of thing. And then if you don't do any of that, then you gotta try to work really hard on master compression. And if you don't do any of that, then you gotta work hard on doing everything else. So why not just do everything all at once? Because any change you make is going to necessitate changes on other things if you want it to be balanced, depending on if you want it to be balanced. So like this track is a wonderful example of that, because a lot about how like it already being compressed is because of the arrangement nature, and the ducking with the intricate multi-band ducking, and then like leveling, a little bit of leveling, not so much leveling, like it just kind of it's just there really, and then EQing and high passing, that kind of stuff. But then like really the sound design kind of contributed to that, because while I high pass some stuff, it's mostly just like they were designed to fit together based on the kind of instruments they are, which is also kind of like a true thing in metal as well. Like a lot about a guitar's tone, like that really scoopy mid guitar tone that like Metallica likes a lot, that honestly was a mixing decision to make a guitar sound like that, because now you have a lot of room for vocals and for the snare and for drums. And like the non-existent bass tones on every album they've ever done helps mixing tremendously when you don't have that much to deal with. And like the rolling off the high end on guitar tones makes the cymbals and the hats and stuff of the drums fit together, that kind of thing, and also lead instruments and that sort of stuff. The tones and this like the sound design of those instruments influence the overall mix. It was influenced by the mix, essentially, is what I'm saying. It's like everything is intertwined, is what I'm saying. So you can't really consider it all as being separate things, and really you should be doing it all at once. That's what happened with this song. Actually, let's see what this looks like without the actual mastering on it. Slightly more dynamic. Not necessarily in a meaningful way. I can tell that some of you might have actually preferred with this hour like a second ago without the compression, and some of you might think that the compression was awesome and amazing, and that the other way it was just too lame and stupid. And that's kind of another thing, is that like there's not really a best way to do any of these things. It's just that they are all related to each other insofar as an action on one thing will affect how something else has to happen. And like the right way of doing things and the way of progressing about it is going to be different for every track, going to be different for every producer, and different for everybody's sensibilities of what sounds good. And that my friends, is why I've never made a general series on mixing and mastering, because everything that's ever been about it is always a specific decision that has to do with precisely what's happening in that one song, which is why I ever talk about it essentially like this, in a context or something like that. Anyway, if you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all of that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.